The man behind the silence. The room was full. Cameras clicked. Lights flashed. Reporters whispered. Sundar Pichai had just finished his speech at the Global Innovation Summit in New Delhi. It wasn't just any speech. It was calm, thoughtful, and filled with stories from his childhood in Chennai, about the narrow streets, the small house, and the long evenings without electricity. He spoke about dreams that don't fit inside small rooms, and how he found ways to make them grow. As the applause faded, people stood to take pictures, but in the back of the crowd someone stood still. It was Prime Minister Modi. He didn't clap. He didn't move. He just watched Sundar. His eyes didn't blink. No one noticed when he quietly slipped out behind Sundar. No one knew he had told his security to wait outside. Outside the hall, Sundar walked alone. The noise of the summit faded. He looked tired. Not physically, but the kind of tired that comes from carrying quiet pressure for years. Sundar thought he was alone. He wasn't. Modi followed him down a long corridor, silent as a shadow. Sundar stopped at a quiet garden behind the venue. He sat on a bench. His hands trembled a little. Modi watched from behind a tree. 5 minutes passed. Then Sundar took out an old photo from his wallet. It was creased and faded, a picture of his father standing next to a broken scooter, smiling. "You never saw this," Sundar whispered to the photo. "But today, I talked to a world that once never listened to us." Suddenly, a soft voice broke the silence. He would be proud. Sundar turned sharply. His eyes widened. "Sir?" Modi stepped into the light. He didn't smile. He sat next to Sundar. "I listened to every word," Modi said quietly. "But there was something behind your words. Something you didn't say." Sundar looked down. "I don't always feel like I belong in these rooms. Not even today." Modi nodded. "I know that feeling." They sat in silence. Then Modi asked a strange question. "What do you think your father wanted for you, beyond success?" Sundar answered slowly. "Kindness, peace, not just for me, but for those who don't have the chance to speak." Modi stood up. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "To a place where words don't matter. Only truth does." Sundar hesitated. But then he followed. They walked out the back gate, leaving the official cars and security behind. No one saw them. No one knew where they went. They entered a narrow alley filled with old houses and quiet eyes behind windows. After 5 minutes, they reached a tiny tea stall. An old man sat there boiling tea on a rusted stove. His hands were scarred. He didn't look up when they arrived. Modi greeted him with respect. The man smiled without teeth. Sundar was confused. "He doesn't speak," Modi said. "But he teaches." The old man handed Sundar a cup of tea. It burned his fingers. It wasn't just hot. It was sharp, spicy, made in a way he hadn't tasted in years. "This was your childhood, wasn't it?" Modi asked. Sundar nodded, eyes wet. The old man pointed at Sundar's shoes. Polished, foreign. Then he pointed at his own bare feet. No words, just gestures. Modi spoke again. "This is the gap you were talking about, the space between worlds. How do we close it?" Sundar asked. "By remembering who we are, by returning, even when we have nothing to prove." Sundar sat on the wooden stool, the tea warming his hands. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like an outsider. Just then, a boy ran up to them, breathless. He handed a folded piece of paper to Sundar. There were no words on it. Only a drawing, a house, a light bulb, and 3 stick figures holding hands. Sundar looked up. "Who drew this?" The boy pointed at the tea stall owner. Modi said nothing. A tear rolled down Sundar's cheek. He stood up, full of questions. But then a loud sound cut through the silence. A car horn. A scream. Modi grabbed Sundar and pulled him down. Glass shattered. People ran. "Stay down," Modi said sharply. But it was too late. The tea stall was on fire. The old man was gone, and the drawing was burning in Sundar's hand. Ashes of a forgotten voice, smoke curled into the air like a warning, sharp, bitter. The flames danced across the dry wooden frame of the tea stall, devouring everything in their path. A crowd gathered within seconds, their faces filled with shock, confusion, and fear. Some pulled out phones, others shouted for water. But Sundar stood frozen, staring at the place where the old man had been only moments ago. The man who didn't speak. The man who had given him something deeper than words. The heat pressed against Sundar's skin, not just from the fire, but from the weight of something he didn't yet understand. His hands shook, the half-burnt drawing still in his grip. The paper was curling, turning black along the edges. The image, the house, the light bulb, the stick figures, was almost gone. But the feeling it carried, that strange mixture of home and hope, remained heavy inside him. "We need to move," Modi said firmly, pulling Sundar back into the shadows. Sundar resisted at first. "We have to help him, the old man. He's gone," Modi replied, his voice quiet but certain. "And if we stay, we'll be next." Those words hit Sundar harder than the smoke. Modi led him through the back alleys, weaving between rusted gates and broken bricks. It felt like they were moving through a maze that had been forgotten by time, the kind of neighborhood Sundar hadn't seen since he was a boy. Here the streets didn't speak the language of wealth or power. They whispered stories in cracked walls and torn clothes, stories Sundar had tried hard not to forget, but maybe had pushed too far to the edge of his mind. As they walked, Sundar kept glancing back. The fire still burned in the distance, casting a red glow over the narrow lane. "Who was he?" Sundar asked suddenly, his voice raw. "That man at the tea stall. You said he teaches. Who was he really?" Modi didn't answer right away. He slowed his steps, eyes scanning the shadows. Then he spoke. His name was Suraj Bhai, no last name. He refused it, said names were for people who needed to be remembered. He believed the work should speak, not the man. Sundar tried to process this. "He once ran a school," Modi continued, "under a tree. He taught children who weren't allowed in the classrooms. He never asked for money, never accepted gifts, but one day his school was burned down. People said it was an accident. It wasn't. He lost his voice that day. Literally. A piece of metal hit his throat. He never spoke again." "Why would someone do that?" Sundar asked. "Because truth is dangerous when it comes from the poor," Modi said bitterly, and he refused to stop teaching. They came to a stop near an abandoned house. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, doors hanging from hinges, windows broken, paint peeled like old skin, but Modi opened the gate without hesitation, motioning Sundar inside. "Why here?" Sundar asked. "Because no one will look for us here," Modi said, "and because this is where Suraj Bhai used to live." Inside, the air was thick with dust. Each step stirred memories into the air. Faded photographs on the walls, broken toys, scribbled notes in childlike handwriting. Modi picked up a small book from the corner of the room and handed it to Sundar. The cover was torn. Inside were dozens of pages, some written, some drawn. Stick figures, lessons about kindness, pages full of hand-drawn light bulbs. Simple messages like, "Never speak if your voice steals another's silence," and "Teach, even if no one listens." Sundar flipped through slowly. "This is his work," he whispered. Modi nodded. "And now it's yours." "What do you mean?" "You're the one who still has a voice, and people actually listen to you." Sundar sat down, the book heavy in his hands. "I spent my life building things," he said. "Machines, systems, platforms. But this feels like something I've never built, something I've never even understood." Modi sat across from him. "Power without memory is hollow. The world respects you, Sundar. But what do you respect?" The question felt like a blade. Outside, the street had quieted. Only distant voices remained. Sundar looked down at his phone. Hundreds of missed calls, messages, headlines already reporting the fire at the summit's back gate. Possible accident, they were calling it. But Sundar knew better. The timing, the silence, the strange boy with the drawing. None of it made sense. Someone was sending a message. They were targeting you, Modi said, reading his face. Not him. Why? Sundar asked. I haven't done anything. That's exactly why. Because you haven't done anything, because you're safe, quiet, predictable, and when a man like you finally begins to speak from the soul, it scares people. Sundar leaned back, his head against the wall. He closed his eyes. He saw his father again, smiling next to the old scooter. He heard his mother calling him in from the street. He remembered the power cuts, the heat, the books read under candlelight. He remembered the dream that once lived in those rooms, not the dream of success, but the dream of meaning. Then the sound came. A knock. Soft. Deliberate. Modi stood up quickly, motioning for silence. Another knock. Then a voice. Sundar. They both froze. It was a child's voice. Modi looked through a crack in the door. It's the boy from the tea stall, he whispered. Sundar rushed forward. He survived? Modi held him back. We don't know who he really is. But Sundar opened the door. The boy stood there shaking, eyes wide. He held something in his hand. A phone. He told me to give you this, the boy said. Who? Sundar asked. The man who couldn't talk. Before the fire. Sundar took the phone. It was old. Dusty. Probably hadn't been used in years. But it lit up as soon as he touched it. There was only one video saved on it. He hit play. The screen flickered. Then came the image of Suraj Bhai, recorded secretly, pointing at a map on the wall, his finger moving from village to village, and then stopping at one small town. In the corner of the frame, scribbled on the wall behind him, were 5 words, the eye, truth still lives there. Before Sundar could say anything, the video ended. Modi leaned closer. That town, I know it. It's off the grid, barely marked, but something happened there years ago. What? Sundar asked. A power company promised to light it up, gave speeches, shook hands, but the wires never came. Money vanished. People disappeared. Sundar felt his stomach turn. You think this is connected? I think it's only the beginning, Modi said. They turned to the boy, but he was gone. Vanished into the night, Sundar clutched the phone, his heart racing, and somewhere deep inside him, a voice he hadn't heard in years began to whisper again. A voice that said, go back. Not to Silicon Valley. Not to the spotlight. Go back to the beginning. Just then the house went dark. The lights died, and from the far end of the alley came the sound of boots. Slow. Steady. Closing in. The town that never lit up. The boots came closer. Each step echoed like a warning. Slow and heavy, crunching against gravel and old glass. Sundar and Modi didn't move. For a long, breathless moment, neither spoke. They just listened, to the silence between each step, to the tension thick in the walls, to their own hearts pounding in unison. Darkness had filled the old house. Completely now. It felt like the past itself had returned, not as a memory but as a shadow walking toward them. Modi moved first. He tapped Sundar's shoulder lightly and pointed toward the back of the house. Sundar followed without hesitation. He didn't ask questions this time, he didn't need to. Something deep inside him had shifted. Not fear exactly, but a sharp awareness. A sense that nothing would go back to how it was. They slipped out the back door, careful not to make a sound. The alley behind them was narrow, littered with broken pots, scattered papers, and a cracked mirror hanging crooked on a wall. In the mirror, Sundar saw himself for a split second, not as a CEO, not as a global figure, but as a man running from something bigger than himself. And maybe, just maybe, running toward something too. They didn't stop until they reached an old railway yard on the edge of the city. Rusted engines stood like sleeping giants, covered in dust, forgotten by time. Modi led them to a small shed, at the far end. It was dark inside but dry, safe at least for the moment. Sundar sat down on a metal box. His body trembled not from the cold but from everything crashing into him at once, and the fire, the drawing, Suraj Bai's message, and the final words on the phone. The truth still lives there. What's the name of the town? Sundar finally asked. Modi hesitated, then took out an old folded map from his jacket. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. He spread it out on the floor. Narayanpur, he said. The name meant nothing to Sundar. He had never heard it before. Population, under 2,000, Modi continued. No digital records, no electricity, nothing on Google Maps. Officially, the town exists, but to the world it might as well be a ghost. Why? Sundar asked. Because someone wanted it forgotten. Modi pointed to a symbol on the edge of the town's name, a lightning bolt. This was the site of the first failed rural electrification pilot, funded by a foreign tech giant over a decade ago. There was money, there were promises. Then suddenly silence. The project was shut down. The villagers were told their homes weren't compatible with the system. Sundar frowned. That doesn't make sense. Incompatible how? That's what no one ever explained. Journalists tried to report on it. Some were threatened, others disappeared. And one, a young man, wrote a blog post exposing the corruption. It vanished within hours. The man was never seen again. What was his name? Sundar asked quietly. Modi paused. Suraj. Sundar stared at him. Suraj Bai? Modi nodded. The truth hit Sundar like a train. Suraj Bai wasn't just a teacher. He was the whistleblower. The man who had tried to tell the world and paid the price with his voice. And his life. This is personal, Sundar whispered. Modi folded the map slowly. That's why he sent you the message. He waited years for someone who could finish what he started. Sundar leaned back, his mind racing. But why me? I wasn't even part of that project. No, Modi said. But the company that led the pilot, it used your software. Sundar went silent. It made sense now. The targeted fire, the message, the quiet accusation hidden in kindness, the technology he had helped build, the platforms he had once believed would change the world. They had been used in ways he had never intended. If what you're saying is true, Sundar said, then Narayanpur holds something they don't want found. Modi nodded. Or someone. Sundar stood up, his breath steady now. We need to go there. Modi looked at him with calm seriousness. It won't be easy. You won't have security. You won't have comfort. And once you step into Narayanpur, you may not come back the same. Maybe that's the point, Sundar said. They left that night in an old jeep, disguised as field researchers for a non-profit. Modi insisted they travel without electronics. No GPS, no calls. Just the map and silence between them. For hours, they drove through countryside roads past fields that glowed silver under the moonlight, through villages that looked like dreams from a slower time. But Sundar's mind was wide awake. Every bump on the road shook loose a memory, not of Silicon Valley or boardrooms, but of childhood, of standing in line to fill water, of waiting outside government offices, of watching his parents hide their worry behind tired smiles. And slowly, he began to remember what hunger really looked like. Not for food, but for a chance. For someone to believe they mattered. By sunrise, they reached the edge of Narayanpur. There was no signboard, just an old milestone half buried in dirt. The road ended in a trail. They walked the last stretch. The town looked empty at first. Too quiet. No dogs barking. No children running. Only the wind, brushing past wooden shacks and torn flags. Then, from behind a broken wall, an old woman appeared. Her back was bent, her eyes sharp. She looked at Sundar without fear. You're the man from the screen, she said. Sundar froze. You recognize me? She nodded. We have one phone here. Sometimes it shows your face. How? Don't know, she said. But Suraj told us you'd come. She led them through the village. People began to gather, mostly older women, a few men, children peeking from doorways. The houses were in ruins. Wires hung uselessly from poles. Solar panels, cracked and dusty, lay discarded in corners. Machines that had once promised hope now sat like abandoned bones. Modi asked softly, "How long has it been like this?" The woman didn't answer. She just pointed. They came to a small house at the far end of the village. Inside, the walls were lined with journals, blue ink page after page detailing dates, costs, names, evidence, testimony, and taped on the wall, a single piece of paper, a blueprint, not just of the town, but of something buried underneath it. Sundar stepped forward, heart pounding. On the bottom of the page was a single line scribbled in faded ink. If this is ever read, it means the story is not yet over. Just then a sound cut through the village, a loud engine, a black jeep rolling fast over the trail. "They found us," Modi said, but Sundar didn't flinch. He turned toward the villagers, and for the first time, he spoke not as a CEO, but as a man. "No more silence," he said. The door shook. Someone outside shouted his name. And inside the old house, surrounded by the voices of the forgotten, Sundar took a step toward the door, toward the truth. The door, that should never open, the door shook again, this time harder. Not just a knock, a threat. The kind of knock that carried weight. Behind it, Sundar could feel the presence of men who didn't come to ask questions. They came to end them. The type of men who left no trace, no names, only silence in their path. The kind who worked for no government, served no law, and only appeared when the truth became too dangerous to live. Modi stepped in front of the door, his hand on an old iron rod leaned against the wall. His posture was calm, but his eyes scanned the room like a man who had been in this position before. Sundar stood behind him, still clutching the blueprint. The drawing in his hands now felt like a weapon. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that exposes. And sometimes that was even more dangerous. The villagers had disappeared into their homes. Shutters slammed shut. Curtains pulled tight. The old woman who had welcomed them was gone too. The entire village seemed to be holding its breath. Modi leaned close and whispered, "If they break the door, you run. Out the back, don't stop." But Sundar didn't move. "No," Modi turned. "This is not a time for pride." "It's not pride," Sundar replied. "It's time." The door burst open. 3 men stepped in. No uniforms, no words. Just eyes like ice and hands ready for violence. But they stopped, because Sundar was not backing away. He stepped forward slowly, deliberately, and placed the blueprint on the table. "If you're here to destroy something," Sundar said, "look at what you're trying to bury." For a few seconds no one moved. Then one of the men spoke. Low, almost casual. "You're in a place you don't belong." "Maybe," Sundar said, "but this blueprint says otherwise." The man stepped closer. "You think a drawing will save you?" "No," Sundar replied, "but the truth behind it might." Modi held the rod tighter but didn't speak. The man stared at Sundar for a long time, then smiled. "Leave by morning," he said, "or this village will light up the wrong way." They turned and left, slamming the door behind them. Sundar sat down slowly. He felt the weight of something pressing down on him. It wasn't fear, it wasn't confusion. It was something worse. Helplessness. He looked at Modi. "What do they mean, light up the wrong way?" Modi answered quietly. "They've done it before. Fire disguised as progress. Erasure dressed as development. They think the world forgets as fast as it scrolls." Sundar looked at the blueprint. Again. There, hidden under layers of wiring, was a square marked in red. It wasn't a building. It wasn't a grid. It was labeled only with 2 words. Backup chamber. "What's this?" he asked. Modi leaned in. "That's where Suraj Bai hid. The real evidence, the data, the files, everything he collected. But he told no one how to reach it. We need to find it." Sundar said. Tonight. They waited until after midnight. The village returned to a dead silence. No lights, no sounds. The kind of silence that made every footstep feel like a drum. They followed the blueprint out of the house, through the back lanes of the village, past the broken transformer that still bore the rusted nameplate of a forgotten tech contractor. At the edge of the village was an old well, dry, sealed with a concrete lid, barely noticeable now. Modi bent down and knocked on the side. It rang hollow. He smiled slightly. This isn't a well. They pushed the lid aside, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. They went in. The air was thick underground, damp and cold. Each step down was a journey through time. Carved stone walls, old wiring snaking across the ceiling, the smell of earth and silence. Halfway down, they found a door. Rusted shut. It took both of them to force it open. Inside was a small concrete room, and in the middle of it a single desk. On the desk, a metal box. Sundar opened it slowly. Inside were several old hard drives, wrapped in cloth. Beside them, a photo of Suraj Bai, younger, standing with villagers, smiling, holding a placard that said, "Don't electrify us, empower us." Sundar looked through the drives, each one labeled by hand, one word on each. Proof. Contracts, emails, locations, witness. His hands trembled. This was it. This was the truth. Everything that had been buried, erased, threatened into silence. It was all here, waiting for someone to believe it still mattered. Modi looked over his shoulder. "We need to get these out, upload them somewhere." "I can't risk doing it from here," Sundar said. "They'll intercept it. I need time, and a secure line. Then we leave tonight." They returned to the house just before dawn, but something had changed. The village was awake, not loud, not panicked, but watching. Eyes at every window, men standing silently outside homes. Modi slowed. "They know." Sundar stepped forward, holding the box. He walked into the center of the village and raised it high. "We found the truth," he said. No one spoke. Then the old woman appeared again. She walked slowly toward him. Her eyes locked with his. "What will you do with it?" she asked. "Share it," Sundar said. "Everywhere." "And then?" Sundar hesitated. "Come back." "Why?" she asked. "You have a life elsewhere." He paused, then said quietly, "But not a purpose." She nodded once, then pointed behind him. A car was coming down the dirt road, not black, not silent, but bright blue, and marked with the seal of a national newspaper. "Modi," Sundar said. "Did you?" "I made a call," Modi replied. "You're not the only one who believes stories can save lives." The reporter stepped out, young, unsure, holding only a mic and a laptop. She looked at Sundar, confused. "I got a message," she said, "from someone who signed it only with a drawing." She held it up, the same one Sundar had found in the fire. The house, the light bulb, the 3 figures. This one was whole, untouched. Sundar smiled. "We're ready," he said. Just then, the sound returned, not footsteps, not engines. Helicopter blades, approaching fast. Modi's face darkened. "They're coming to stop this." But Sundar didn't move. He handed the first drive to the reporter. "Start the upload," he said. As the sky roared above them, as villagers braced themselves for whatever came next, Sundar stood still. No fear, no hesitation, because for the first time, he wasn't building anything. He was breaking the silence. And just as the blades thundered above, a voice rang out from the loudspeaker of the reporter's van. "Live. Streaming. Reaching the world." "This is Sundar Pichai," he said. "And this is the story they didn't want you to hear." The voices we were never meant to har. The sky cracked open with sound. Blades tore through the dawn, slicing the quiet like a warning. The helicopter hovered low, its roar filling the village of Narayanpur. It kicked up a storm of dust and loose paper. Some villagers ducked into homes. Others stood in silence, unmoved. They had lived through storms before, floods, lies, broken promises. What was one more? But this was not just a storm. This was a reckoning. And Sundar stood at the center of it. The young reporter sat in the van, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. The hard drive hummed, uploading the files into a secured system connected to 3 mirrored servers around the world. Modi had arranged the connection. Through old contacts. The kind that don't exist on paper but live in quiet corners of old truths, but they were racing against time. Inside the van, the screen showed the upload bar, crawling, 3%, then 6%. Outside, the helicopter began to descend, slowly, heavily, boots visible, helmets, masked faces. Sundar didn't move. He stood near the village well, facing them, his shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. There was no fight in him, but no fear either. He was no longer running. A man stepped out of the helicopter, tall, clean shoes, expensive watch, not military, corporate. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He walked up to Sundar and stopped just short of arm's length. "You've made a mistake," the man said. "You've walked into a fire you don't understand." Sundar didn't reply. "We let you be the face," the man continued. "A quiet genius, a symbol. Now you're playing hero to ghosts." He glanced at the villagers watching from behind shutters. "You want to expose something?" he said. "This town doesn't even exist officially. We can erase it again. In 5 minutes, no headlines, no witnesses, and you'll still have your mansion, your stock options, your speeches." Sundar looked down at the ground for a long moment. Then he said, "You erased their light, but not their story." The man laughed. "You think stories can stop us?" Sundar raised his hand slowly. Behind him, the van door swung open. The reporter stepped out, holding a phone. The live stream was already running. Over 600,000 viewers. The truth had already begun to move. Sundar took the mic. His voice was quiet, but in the silence it was the only thing that mattered. "Years ago a project was launched here," he began. "It promised light, hope, connection, but instead it brought silence. Power lines were built with no purpose. Devices were installed but never activated. The budget disappeared, the faces behind it walked away clean. And the people were left behind. Invisible." He paused. "I didn't know at the time. But now I do. And so do you." He held up a second hard drive. "This is not just data. It's names, contracts, recordings. It's the proof of everything that was stolen. Not just money, but dignity." Behind him, the screen showed footage. Suraj Bai's journals, children sitting under broken lights, invoices with missing digits, a voice recording from a whistleblower, afraid and trembling. And then, a familiar face, Sundar's own, a younger version, giving a presentation about a product that was later used in the failed project. He froze for a moment. The audience online saw it too. He didn't run from it, he leaned into the mic. "That was me. I didn't know where it would be used. I didn't ask." And that silence helped them hide. But silence isn't neutral. Silence is a choice. His voice cracked slightly. "I was part of the system. Now I want to change it." The man from the helicopter stepped forward, angry now. "You think this speech will save you?" "No," Sundar replied. "But it might save them." He pointed at the villagers. The man made a motion with his hand. The masked men stepped closer. But then something shifted. The villagers moved too. Slowly, without words, they stepped out from behind doors. Older men, women with children, farmers with dust on their hands. One by one, they filled the space between Sundar and the men. No weapons, just presence. They stood in silence, the same silence that had been used against them for years. But now, it was not weakness. It was strength. The man from the helicopter hesitated. He looked around. No easy way out. Cameras were rolling. Voices online rising, hashtags forming. The silence had become sound. An hour later, the helicopter was gone. So were the men. The reporter wept as the final files finished uploading, and the villagers gathered in the central square sitting under the morning sun, their faces soft but steady. Sundar stood beside Modi, watching. "You're not done," Modi said. "I know," Sundar replied. This was just step one. 2 weeks later, a global press conference was held. Not in a glass tower, not on a digital stage, but in Narayanpur. There were no microphones, just Sundar sitting beside a group of villagers. The spotlight wasn't on him, it was on them. One by one they spoke, in their own language. No Polish, no script, just truth, and the world listened. What no one knew was this. That same night, Sundar received a message on a private line, a video. No sender. He opened it. The frame was dark. Then a candle lit, and Suraj Bhai's face appeared. His voice, broken and rasping, filled the screen. "If you're watching this, you chose right." He coughed. "I was never trying to fight giants, just trying to protect small lights." He held up the same drawing, the house, the light bulb, the 3 figures. "This was never about me," he said. "It's about remembering that the world can't be fixed by machines, only by people." The video ended. Sundar sat for a long time, silent. Then he picked up his phone and typed a short message. "I'm stepping down." And below it, "I'm going back," but even as he pressed send, he didn't know. That far away in another part of the world, a child was watching the live stream replay on a borrowed tablet. He didn't know Sundar. He couldn't even read. But he looked at the drawing on the screen. The house, the light bulb, the 3 stick figures, and smiled, because he recognized it. It was his. He was the boy who drew it, and now the world was watching his story. The fire that never dies, the wind blew gently through the village of Narayanpur, but everything had changed. Weeks had passed since the broadcast. The video of Sundar's speech had gone viral, not because of who he was, but because of how he said it. Not polished, not powerful, not loud, just honest. People didn't see a billionaire. They saw a man who had finally stopped speaking for himself and started listening for others. The clip of him holding the burned drawing, holding it like a flag, had been replayed across news channels, classrooms, and street gatherings. And something strange began to happen. People began drawing their own versions. Houses, light bulbs, stick figures, some crude, some colorful, some on paper, some on walls. And with each drawing, something deeper spread. Not just a symbol, but a quiet rebellion against forgetting. Sundar didn't go back to his office in California. He didn't take a final bow. There was no farewell tour. He simply stepped away. He returned to the villages, not just Narayanpur, but dozens more. The ones without names on maps. The ones with broken wires and broken trust. He sat on floors, shared meals, listened to teachers with no schools, to mothers with no electricity, to children who drew future, cities in the dirt with sticks. The change was slow, but it was real. With Modi's help, and without fanfare, they started the Voice Project. Not a foundation, not a charity, just a movement. They didn't hand out laptops. They handed out solar radios. They didn't open tech hubs. They trained young people to record stories from their elders. They didn't speak over anyone. They built platforms for others to speak. And everywhere they went, they told one story. About a man who didn't speak but taught the world anyway. Suraj Bhai's name became something whispered like a blessing. A name carved onto new community halls. A name sung by children as part of morning lessons. The journals he left behind, scanned, translated, shared, became a curriculum in unlikely places. And all the while Sundar stayed in the background. He walked dusty paths. He ate simple food. And slowly he started to forget the language of boardrooms and remember the language of belonging. But then came the message. An envelope. Hand-delivered to a small town near Bhagalpur, where Sundar had been helping set up a mobile storytelling lab in an old train car. The envelope had no return address. Just a drawing on the front. The same one. The house. The light bulb. The 3 figures. But this time, there was something new. A small heart drawn in the corner. And beneath it, a signature. Ayush Sundar opened the letter carefully. Inside was a short message, written in shaky handwriting. I remember you. I was the boy, the one from the fire. I didn't know why I drew that picture, but now I do. I want to help. Can you come see? No phone number, just a location. A tiny village even smaller than Narayanpur, nestled in the shadows of the eastern Ghats. Sundar didn't wait. He packed a single bag, told no one except Modi, and took a train the next day. The village was even poorer than most. No roads, no clinic, a single water pump in the center. But the people were warm, and when Sundar arrived, the children ran up to him with crayons and pages. Every one of them had drawn the same thing. Somehow the story had arrived before him. And waiting under the banyan tree, wearing a red shirt 2 sizes too big, was the boy, Ayush. He smiled nervously, clutching a plastic folder to his chest. Sundar knelt down and asked, "Why did you send the letter?" Ayush said softly, "Because the story isn't finished." He handed Sundar the folder. Inside were more drawings. But they were different now. They weren't just houses and stick figures. They were blueprints, designs, a solar grid drawn from memory, a wind-powered filtration pump, a learning center built from mud and recycled wood. Where did you get these ideas? Sundar asked. I listened, Ayush said. After the fire, I hid, but I listened, and I remembered. Remembered what? Ayush looked up. Everything Suraj Bhai said, even when he didn't speak. I remember how he moved his hands, how he pointed to the stars, how he showed us. That silence is also teaching. That night, Sundar sat under the tree, the drawings in his lap. He didn't cry, but something inside him opened. A part of him that had long been closed by the walls of corporate success, by deadlines and data points, by the quiet guilt of never asking where his work ended up. Now he knew it ended here, or maybe it began here. He stayed in that village for a month, longer than he had stayed anywhere in the last 20 years. He taught Ayush how to digitize his designs. He helped the villagers set up their first independent power unit, not funded by governments or tech giants, but built with their own hands with local tools and Ayush's blueprint. And when the first bulb lit up that night, soft, yellow, flickering gently, Sundar didn't speak. He just smiled, because it was the same light that had lived in Suraj Bhai's eyes. 1 year later, Sundar declined an award, the biggest in tech. He wrote a letter instead. It ended with these words. Used to build systems. Now I build spaces. Spaces for others to rise. We don't need more heroes. We need more listeners. Because when we listen, truly listen, even silence begins to speak. Somewhere in the world, people still draw the picture. Sometimes on paper. Sometimes on cracked walls. Sometimes with nothing but their finger in the dust. A house. A light bulb. 3 figures holding hands. No names. No headlines. Just a message. And in small villages from India to Peru, from Uganda to Syria, someone always asks, "What is this?" And the answer comes softly. It's a story about a man who followed another into the dark and found the light waiting for them both.